Okay, fam, I am currently traveling, so I am in my hotel room and I'm just trying to deal with jet lag and stuff. You'll find out why I'm traveling soon enough. But they just dropped the PC spec sheet and Mac spec sheet and ROG Ally spec sheet and even the console spec sheet for Crimson Desert. It's actually here. So I wanted to run through it with you real quick just so we have it, out on the table. And just to be clear, and full transparency, I've been reviewing it. I've even been playing it while I'm here traveling. So I will have a review out soon enough. But I didn't know what the specs were expected to be. I didn't know about all of the nitty gritty stuff. Even Mac performance is listed. Shocker. I'm not reviewing it on Mac. So I'm very excited to see this. Even with console specs and targets, this is interesting. So let's just get into it. First thing first is the PC slide where they list the minimum, low, recommended, high, and ultra specs that they're targeting. So you can see on each of these are targeting native resolutions. So these are not being done assuming that you're using DLSS or anything like that. That's important to state up front. They are optimizing it for native rendering. Full stop. Okay. So, and if they do have a statement or a point where they are upscaling, they state that clearly. Okay. So you can see here, minimum is 1080p upscaled. That is under performance. So upscaling from 900 to 1080, targeting 30 FPS. This is what you can expect. But for the other ones where they list 4K 60, that's 4K 60 native, just to be clear. But minimum specs, they're saying it can run on a 1060 or a 5500 XT, upscaling from 900. That's wild. That puts it in the realm of old GPUs. The 1060 is, that's not even RTX, that's a GTX 1060. That's from 2016. It launched July 19th, 2016. So decade old GPUs are supported. Granted, you're going to be rendering it at 900p, upscaling to 1080. But back in 2016, 1080 was kind of the standard. So that's absolutely incredible that they got it running like that. So that's impressive. That being said, it does require 16 gigs of RAM across the board as a minimum and an SSD. So if you're expecting this to run on your big hard drive or something, it doesn't seem like it's going to. Continuing on, we have the low specs 1080p 30. They can do that on a 1660 and a 6500 XT. And it's also important to note they are specifically mentioning which version of Windows 10 you need, and they are mentioning that you need 150 gigs to install it. Recommended is medium settings, 1080p 60 or 4K 30, and they can achieve that with a 2080 or with the 6700 XT and pretty, standard mid-range CPUs like i5s and Ryzen 5s. I know some people get triggered that I said that's mid-range, but when you consider what's possible on the high end, I think you can understand. That being said, moving on to high, that's achieving graphic presets of high at 1440p 60. Again, no upscaling, so if you were using an upscaler, you could even upscale to 4K from 1440p, which is still very, very solid. And they're achieving that on a 4070 or a 7700 XT with, again, sort of mid-level CPUs, i5 12600K or Ryzen 5 7600X. And then for the ultra settings, they are achieving ultra at 4K 60 with a 9070 XT or with an RTX 5070 Ti. Which is impressive because that's not even top of the PC market. And we do know, in case you're not familiar, this was already discussed previously, but they do have the game optimized to a point where they even have a setting above ultra. It's called cinematic. And as far as I know, no footage of it running on cinematic is public yet. So while ultra looks really, really good, there's a setting even above that, just to be clear. And so if you're running a 5080 or a 5090 and you're I want to really push it, rest assured there are going to be settings for you to push with that higher end hardware, but that's where they're at. So already just looking at the PC specs, very impressive, very impressive. The fact that it is even able to boot on a 10-year-old GPU is crazy to me. But anyway, continuing on, they get to the console specs. This is probably what most people have been waiting for. And I'll have Jacob put timestamps in the video. I guess it's too late now for you to benefit from it, but we'll have timestamps in the description box so you can skip around to the parts that are interesting to you. But the PlayStation 5, here we go. There are 3 different settings. Okay, we didn't know this before. 3 different settings: performance, balanced, and quality. Performance targets 1080p at 60 FPS with VSync turned on, or they even allow you to go above 60 FPS with variable refresh rate if your display supports it. This actually lines up with the sort of standard for most AAA games on the PlayStation 5, the base console, which is to achieve full HD at 60 frames. That puts it in line with other AAA games, even from Sony, like first-party studios, so that is impressive. As for ray tracing, you'll see that ray tracing is enabled on all of the PlayStation 5 versions, all of the, including the Pro, of course, and the Series X, but they do not have it supported on the Series S at all, which isn't that surprising. The Series S, they're targeting 720p on performance mode with 40 FPS with VSync turned on and ray tracing off. Quality mode, which they do support there, targets 1080p at 30 FPS, again with no ray tracing, and that's not really surprising. The Series S is far and away like the weakest of the media center consoles. I'll call it media center because now the Switch 2 regularly can like outperform it in terms of image quality, especially with its DLSS support, but that's a debate for another time, I suppose. The PlayStation 5 Pro is targeting upscaled 4K on performance mode, upscaling from 1080p using upgraded PSSR. I think that means PSSR 2.0. I mean, I don't know what else that would mean. Upgraded PSSR. It's got to mean 2.0, right? So, and that, if you've not followed the coverage of PSSR 2, it's like way better than the first version, which is really good because the first version wasn't very good. Like it actually made some games look worse, which is crazy. But they're targeting with that, upscaling to 4K on performance mode, they're targeting 60 FPS with VSync, or again, they'll uncap it if you have a variable refresh rate display enabled, and they're achieving high ray tracing settings. As for the PS5 Pro performance on balanced mode, it's upscaling from 1440p to get to 4K, so it's definitely going to look a bit sharper, and that is targeting 40 FPS, but also 48 plus with VRR and ray tracing again on high. And then if you set it to quality mode, it runs at a locked 30 FPS with the ray tracing set to ultra and at 4K, so you can get whichever one you prefer. And then as for the Series X, they're targeting 1080p 60 on performance mode. Balanced is at 4K 40 FPS, but notably they're upscaling on balanced mode from 1280p, whereas the PS5 Pro is doing it from 1440p, but the PS5 is, the base PS5 to be clear, is upscaling from 1280p as well on balanced mode. And then quality mode, they're upscaling from 1440p, 30 FPS, ray tracing on high. All of that's very impressive, and I don't frankly understand how they're able to achieve this with how good the game looks graphically. But what about Mac specs? I'll move through this quickly because I'm not sure many people watching this video are playing on Mac, but amazingly enough, they've actually managed to achieve this. So they're supporting all the way down to the M2 Pro. They like the Ultra settings are possible on M3 Ultra and M4 Max. They don't have M5 listed here, which is the newest, I guess, SoC for Apple. I guess that would be the technical term for it. Like on the recent MacBook Pros, for example, they just updated them with M5s. I actually have a MacBook Pro that I brought with me on this trip, and so that's what I'm reading off of. But this computer is actually running on an M2 Pro, which means according to this spec sheet, I should be able to play it on minimum specs with 720p at 60 FPS if I'm using the Metal FX upscaling. So there's that. So I can play it at 720p. Booyah. I mean, I will just be honest. It is very surprising to see them target Mac because it's just not what I would have expected. You know, I just would not have seen this coming. But you know what? They're doing it. And I think it kind of reiterates the idea that they really are just trying to meet players wherever they are. So if you've had any passing interest in Crimson Desert, they want you to be able to buy it and play it. You know, it's that MMO mentality that you don't see a whole lot in the gaming industry of just meeting everybody everywhere. Typically, you know, at least for the last decade, it's been very much like we're targeting consoles or we're targeting PC or we're targeting Switch, and, you know, they pick their battles, but they're just going everywhere, man. Like everything's an Xbox, basically. That's what they're doing, just everything everywhere. The other thing that they listed was ROG Xbox Ally specifications here, and you can see that they have it targeting on performance mode 720p with FSR 3. They're targeting on the Ally X, which is the next tier up. It's the higher tier version. They're targeting upscaled 1080 from 720 with super resolution and frame gen. They have a balanced mode, upscaling 1080p from 720, but targeting 40 FPS, and then quality mode, which just renders at 1080p and hits 30. A couple of things to note from this is that they do not list, for one, Steam Deck performance. I would assume this doesn't run on Steam Deck, because if it did, I'm sure they would list it. It's not to say it won't ever run on Steam Deck, but my understanding is that a lot of games, especially with proprietary engines, it's not as simple getting it running on Steam Deck as you might think it is, because it's going through multiple layers of emulation basically to get it running on Linux. And the Steam Deck is an amazing piece of machinery. It's an amazing little device, but it is not a brute force device at all. It's never been a beast when it comes to like AAA gaming. The other thing though to list as well is that they don't list like Legion Go 2 performance, which is another handheld, but I would assume that it actually runs quite well there, considering the Legion Go 2 is actually a higher performance device in terms of raw power than even like the Xbox Ally X. The downside being that it's running, full native Windows and all that stuff. But overall, I mean, all of these specs are very impressive. And I mean, it's what I told you guys like 2 weeks ago. I had spoken to Will Powers and I had spoken to people involved with the game, and they were always saying, we're going to be transparent. Like, we're going to tell people how it runs. We're not trying to hide anything. We just need people to be patient. And, to everybody's credit, we're just excited. We just want to know because we're excited about it. We want to see what the game has to offer. So we've been, excited. And that's made the last couple of weeks feel very slow. But I just want to reiterate that like most studios don't share anything. Like the average studio doesn't communicate hardly anything about overall performance. They don't tell you what resolution it's going to be running at, what frame rates they're targeting, how much. Like you get it occasionally with like big releases with a lot of eyeballs on them, but the level of transparency they've put forward here has been pretty admirable. I think it's not, end all be all. The game automatically is a masterpiece. We're not saying that, but it is something that definitely deserves praise and that I think they deserve credit for. I frankly can't think of another studio in recent memory that's been this transparent with this much with their game. And I think it's why they've done it is because people have had their eyes on Crimson Desert. The game looks really, really good, and that's why so many people are excited about it. But, they understood the assignment, Pearl Abyss. They understood that people are skeptical. I think rightly so. It's a studio that's never done a game like this before, and the game looks too good to be true. It looks so impressive that people are like, how on earth are they pulling this off? But that's exactly why they've taken the steps to be transparent and to put it out there and just remove any question. Just show what the game is and show and communicate clearly everything that you can and let people make up their minds from there, which I think is admirable. It doesn't mean that the game will necessarily be for you, but it does mean that I think they deserve credit for clearly not trying to hide anything, which unfortunately happens in this industry where studios will just be like, don't tell people. Just, keep it quiet. Keep it under wraps until the game launches, and we'll just try to ride it all the way to the bank. But they're not doing that here. They're telling people how it's going to run. And frankly, based on these specs, especially looking at console, it's pretty much exactly what I would have expected. And then seeing things like it can run on a 1060, that's just baffling to me. I mean, I'm sure it doesn't look great with everything on minimum specs and running at 30 frames, upscaled from 900p. But you know what? I'm still impressed it runs at all. Most games would just implode if you tried to run them on hardware 10 years old, if they're modern AAA games. So props to them for that. Overall, I'm happy with these specs. We'll see where the game lands because there's always two sides of performance, like I mentioned in my preview, which you should absolutely go watch on the main channel. But anyway, what I was saying is in my preview, I mentioned that there's two sides of performance. There is optimization when it comes to how the game actually is like running in terms of frame rates and resolution and stuff like that. And then there's the other side of it, which is like bugs and optimization of gameplay loops and systems and stuff. That's a separate question, because you can have a game that runs at 500 frames, but if it's got broken quests, that's a separate question, right? And I mentioned in my preview that I had no problems in terms of performance when it comes to resolution or frame rates, but I did run into some bugs in my preview in the endgame save that, raised questions about like overall questing and maybe occasional bugs in that regard. That's something which obviously we just don't know until the game actually launches. But in terms of actual raw performance and frame rates, I'm happy with what I have seen here. So make sure to leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it. Make sure to subscribe, because I'm going to be talking about Crimson Desert a lot more throughout this month, I am sure. And of course, I'm going to be reviewing it when the embargo lifts on the 18th, I believe it is. So buckle up for that one. But until next time, my friends, much love. Thanks for watching and chilling with me in my hotel room as I fight jet lag. I'll see you soon, and I'll be able to tell you about why I'm here soon enough, okay? Much love. See you in the next one. Hugs and kisses. Bye-bye.
He took my thing.